Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SavvyCast. I am your host, Jamie Torrance, and whether you're listening to the podcast or viewing on YouTube, I am delighted that you are here. Today, I have as my guest Annie Jones, and she is the owner of the Bookshelf, an independent bookstore in Thomasville, Georgia. We're going to learn a lot about that today. She's also the host of the podcast From the Front Porch. And she also happens to be my cousin-in-law and friend. And we'll get into that. And for those of you who are SavvyCast listeners who love the Enneagram podcast by Jordan Jones, Annie happens to be his wife. So lots of connections here. Annie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, absolutely. Thrilled to be here.
Yes. Okay. Annie, can you just start by telling us, because I had a friend over yesterday and she was asking, where exactly is Thomasville?
Yeah.
So describe, it's closer to Florida actually than Georgia, isn't it?
Yes, much closer. In fact, Jordan is an attorney who commutes to Tallahassee every day for work. So Thomasville, Georgia is actually a very cute small town right on the Florida-Georgia line. So we're close to Valdosta, to Albany, Georgia. I think some people might be familiar, but we're really about 45 minutes from Tallahassee. So we're farther from Atlanta than we are from Tallahassee.
Right. And Tallahassee is where Florida State. Is that right?
Yep. That's where Florida State is. It's where I grew up. It's the state capital of Florida. And so actually, I think Thomasville really does benefit from being relatively close by to a larger metropolitan area. So not that Tallahassee is not by any means Birmingham or Atlanta, but it is a little bit larger than Thomasville. And so I think Thomasville really benefits from that FSU, state capital traffic.
Yeah, you have the best of both worlds. You have that small town feel, but yet you're connected to a larger area. And Annie, before you were even in the family, before you and Jordan were even married, Zane and I made a trip to Thomasville, and I can't remember why we went. Maybe we just decided to go, and we stayed at a bed and breakfast. I can't remember the name of it. There may just be one. I think it was the Thomasville Inn.
There is a Thomasville Inn, and then there's the Paxton House. Those are the two bed and breakfasts in town.
Okay. But it is a charming town, and it's so funny, Jordan. And when he's been on a few times, there's almost always a siren that goes off. so he said, for some reason, every day a siren, some fire truck or something.
There was one already this morning, and I was like, "Oh, good, get it out of the way now."
Well, it just adds a little levity. So anyway, because sometimes the Enneagram can get deep, so sometimes the siren
breaks it up.
Yes. Okay, Annie, I start every podcast by asking my guests, what would you choose as your last meal and why?
Okay, I love this question because I feel like everybody always asks me about books. Nobody ever asks me about food. Yeah. So I have known the answer since I was a kid. So my favorite meal growing up was steak that my dad marinated and made, green beans, and potatoes. And that's my favorite meal. Is like, I'm a steak and potatoes girl for sure. And so that would be my last meal. I would also like a Coke to drink with ice, preferably out of a fountain. I'd like the Coke from a fountain. And then for dessert, because I think dessert is important, I would do my mom's pound cake.
Oh my goodness. That sounds great. Now, with the last meal, obviously it would have to be your dad's steak, not just any steak. Okay.
That's right. Dad's steak. My dad and mom are both really good cooks. My mom was the cook mostly growing up, but my dad loves to cook. Like, my mom cooked, I think, out of necessity for caring for us. But for my dad, it is a hobby. And so I think that's what would really make a special last meal, is for him to get to make the steak. And I will say it was a close call. Steak has always been my answer, but I do love seafood too. And my dad makes great shrimp from the Gulf Coast. So I also love seafood, but we went with steak.
Well, and you're very fortunate, as are they, that y'all live in the same town, correct?
They
Yeah.
live in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And so they're just 30, 45 minutes away. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the bookshelf. My mom does our store windows. My
Yeah.
dad and I do a bookstore event together. So it's nice to get to include my family in this little dream.
I think that is fabulous. And when I saw what you and your dad are doing, I told Zane, I said, that I love that. And I want to learn more about that. And
Yeah.
let me just ask you, is he formally trained in cooking, or that's just his hobby and
No,
he's just great at it?
totally his hobby, but he is
Okay.
legitimately good at it. He's a
Right.
very good cook.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Well, if you will, and first of all, Annie, you have such a huge following. And even Zane came home from work last week, and I cannot recall exactly who he was talking to, but they got on the subject of books. And someone just brought up your bookstore, your Instagram for bibliophiles, for people who love all things literary. You have made a name for yourself and for the bookstore, and you're providing a service just for people who love books, which sadly, in today's culture with so much technology, it's harder to find what we grew up with. I mean, I went to the library almost every day growing up, and I would check out as many books as I could. We had a
Yeah.
limit, but I mean, literally. And I would stay up at night. I had a flashlight. I would put the covers over my head. I mean, I'm sure that's how you were. And I want you to tell me just about you growing up and how you landed where you are today.
Yeah. So, like you, I mean, we sound very similar. Like, I grew up going to the library pretty religiously, went very often, would, as many books as I could carry, would
Mhm.
take home. And I've always been a pretty fast reader. And I'm grateful for that. Sometimes I wish I would slow it down a little bit, but I'm a pretty fast reader. And especially as a kid, I just devoured books. And one of my mom's favorite stories to tell is she was reading to me, like
Mhm.
moms and dads do. And so she was reading to me an American Girl book back when I was a little girl. And she left the room, or I think she fell asleep, like, as moms are wont to do. Like, I think she kind of dozed off. And when she woke up, I told her I'd finished the book, and she
Oh
didn't
my
believe
gosh.
me.
How old
And
were you, Annie?
I think I was between 6 and 7, I want to say, like 6 or 7.
Oh, wow. Because those are,
So
I mean, that's a fairly long
it
American
was
Girl.
they were like little, yeah, like chapter books, beginner
Yeah.
chapter books, I guess. And so she didn't believe me. And then she asked me to tell her about it. And so I did. And she was like, okay. So, and she teases that she really didn't get then to read to me like a lot of parents get to do, because I was such a fast reader and read such a high
Ooh.
volume, high volume of books. So I've loved reading since I was a kid. I also, when I was 13, and I tell this story fairly frequently, but it really is true. When I was 13, I saw the movie You've Got Mail, which is with Meg Ryan and Tom
Yes.
Hanks.
Love that
And I
movie.
loved that movie. And in the movie, she owns a bookstore called The Shop Around the Corner. And there's a scene where she is the story lady, and she's reading to the kids. And I remember thinking, oh, that's what I'd like to be when I grew up. And I was a kid who had a lot of dreams. I thought I'd be a teacher. I thought I'd be an interior designer for a hot minute. And then I really wanted to be a journalist. That's what I wound up
Mhm.
graduating high school and going to college to become a journalist,
Mhm.
because I love to write. And so all of those were certainly things I wanted to be. But there was something about this woman owning the store and getting to put books into the hands of kids that I really loved. And I thought, oh, that would be so cool. Entrepreneurship is not something really that runs necessarily in my family. It's not necessarily something I was modeled. And so I don't know that I really thought of it as a possibility. I think I thought, oh, I'll go be a journalist, I'll go be a writer. And I did that for a few years. In Tallahassee, I worked for the Florida Bar, which is the legal association, and I was a writer and editor for them.
Mhm.
And then the Bookshelf, which is in Thomasville, which is near Tallahassee, opened a second location in Tallahassee, right down the street from where Jordan and I lived. We were familiar with the store, like you and Zane. Maybe we had come to Thomasville for,
Mhm.
for a date night or things like that. So we were familiar with the Bookshelf. And when the Bookshelf opened its little outpost, or its little second store in Tallahassee, I offered to be story lady. I emailed saying that I would love to volunteer. And next thing you know, I was quitting my job to become
Oh,
manager of the Bookshelf. And so that's kind of how I dipped my toe into entrepreneurship was by managing the bookshelf in Tallahassee.
Okay. And I know a little bit but Zane was more involved, but how did you go from managing to owning? And then
Yeah.
now you've grown it to all of this. I mean, how did that
I
happen?
know. Yeah.
Because obviously you were not actively pursuing entrepreneurship or ownership,
Yeah.
but how did
No.
that happen?
No, so I was managing the bookshelf in Tallahassee, and to be totally honest with you, I think I would have been very content doing that for a long time. Like there's a part of me that I think would have been very content running this bookstore in my hometown. I really loved it. I walked to work every day, which is rare in Tallahassee. You don't Tallahassee is not like a super walkable town, but we lived nearby the bookstore, and so it was really kind of this idyllic experience.
Mhm.
I soon learned after, I think, almost exactly a year of owning or of managing the bookshelf, the owner of the bookshelf decided she was ready to close the Tallahassee store. It had become too much for her. And then she was ready to sell the bookshelf in Thomasville. At that time, Jordan and I were going through some of our own changes, meaning we had really dear friends who were leaving Tallahassee. Like
Mhm.
Tallahassee is a very transient town. I did not know that as a kid, but
Mhm.
as an adult, especially when you're in those early 20s, a lot of people are in Tallahassee to get their masters or PhDs. And so a lot of our friends were moving. And Jordan and I kind of looked at each other and we prayed about it, and we
Mhm.
thought, okay, let's try this. Let's see if this is our adventure. Like, let's see if this is for
Mhm.
us. So we agreed to this kind of experience where we would earn the bookshelf through sweat equity. So it feels very biblical to me. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I worked
Yeah.
for the bookshelf for
Yeah.
5 years. So
Yeah.
we moved to Thomasville. Jordan continues still to commute to Tallahassee, but we moved to Thomasville. I managed and co-owned the bookshelf, and the former owner kind of really was hands off. She introduced me
Mhm.
and helped me get started, but then she kind of let me have the reins. She was in the middle of growing her family, and so I took over the bookshelf's operations essentially for about 5 years and earned the store that way. And then
Wow.
after 5 years, we sat down with our co-owners, and they were really ready to be done, and we decided to go ahead and buy them out. And so we took out a loan, and which was terrifying and scary, but we did that back in 2018. And then after I became full owner, we really did, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, because the pandemic totally changed the way the bookshelf does business. But after that 2018 kind of line of demarcation, we really worked hard to grow the bookshelf and to make
Mhm.
it. I really wanted it to be a regionally recognizable bookstore. I admire so many bookstores all over the South, and I wanted the bookshelf to be among the ones that come to people's minds when they
Mhm.
think about Southern bookstores. And I think we've done that. So, yeah.
Well, to be featured in Southern Living as correct me if I'm wrong, a place you must visit, if
Mhm.
in Thomasville, is that right?
Yes, we've been featured as part of Thomasville's must see spots. And then
Uh-huh.
we've also been featured as one of the best bookstores in the South, which was our goal.
Oh my start. That's amazing. That is amazing. My
Thanks.
goodness. Now let's start. Tell us your Enneagram number and how that comes into play with what you are doing in your life.
Yes. So I am an Enneagram 5. I think I'm a wing 6, but I'm not 100% confident about that. I feel like I struggle a little bit to know my wing. But I know for sure I'm an Enneagram 5. Fives are known as the researchers, and I definitely am a lifelong learner. I love
Mhm.
learning things. I love reading. I love acquiring information. So, in those ways, I think it makes a lot of sense that I would be drawn to bookstore ownership. What is perhaps harder for the Enneagram 5, I think, would be entrepreneurship. I do not think it is something that comes necessarily naturally to me. I think I have to work at it. And I also feel like as a business owner and as a bookstore owner, part of my job and responsibility is to interact with the customers, and which is actually one of the things I have grown to love most about running the store. But as an Enneagram 5, as an INTJ in Myers Briggs terms, I also am highly introverted. And so I definitely need a lot of time to recharge.
Mhm.
I need a lot of margin in my life, and I don't actually have very much margin because of the nature of what I do for a living. And so there are certainly challenges, I think, that come with being an Enneagram 5. This is interesting. I went to a book conference, like a booksellers conference a couple years ago, and Ian Cron was there, who wrote a great book about the Enneagram. And I went up to meet him and get my book signed. And I asked him at the conference, which the conference included booksellers, librarians, bookstagrammers, like it included a wide range of folks. But I asked him what the primary number he was seeing. I was like, what are most people here that you've come across? And he laughed and he said 4s. And I thought that was interesting because, and I think that makes sense for book lovers. I don't know how many of those people were actually shop owners. I'd be curious to know that. But I definitely feel sometimes like as an Enneagram 5, what I am doing is a little different from like being a researcher in a lab, which I feel like might be the assumption of the 5.
Yeah. Well, and you're married to a 3 and I'm married to a 3. So, he can come to events and stir up the crowd, get the kids all excited.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very fortunate because Jordan is where I am highly introverted. Jordan is highly extroverted. We are very similar in a lot of ways, but that is one way we are very different. And Jordan is also in many ways. I mean, we own the business together. He has a job and so he is not around very often, but he certainly acts as a guide, somebody I can bounce my ideas off of, my brainstorming partner. And he is like having a business coach, like in my house, which is really wonderful. So he is a great source of wisdom and encouragement. And his personality is just, whenever he is around, I'm so grateful because you're exactly right. I almost hesitate to use the word charming because that seems to have a negative connotation.
No, it's very true. Yes, birds of a feather. They're birds of a feather.
Yes, but Jordan is very personable and charming. And so when he is in the room, I just automatically feel like, okay, I feel like I'm good at having a one-on-one conversation and I'm definitely good at recommending books. And I feel like over the years, I have become more personable and more warm and enthusiastic. But what I'm good at is one-on-one. And what is comforting to me is if I'm hosting an event, if Jordan is there, I know he is probably mingling with the crowd or introducing himself, and I can kind of focus on the 1 or 2 people I'm talking to. So he's a great partner in crime.
That's great. Well, not only are you and I both married to 3s in the same family, I think you were the first 5 to marry into the family, and I was the first 8. So we were, the first of that as far as the Enneagram goes. But okay, Annie, I had a lot of questions, and let's just go ahead and get this out of the way, and then we can move on to the positive because COVID, I think everyone's tired of talking about it. I'm tired of it, glad that we're coming out of it. But one of the questions that I had at least 3 times was, how did COVID and the shutdowns affect you both mentally and from a business standpoint? And those are intertwined. And the person who asked mentally said, because of what was happening to her business. So
yeah. So here's the interesting part. So Georgia operated, I think, pretty differently from a lot of states. And definitely there were, especially March, April, maybe early May of last year, there were limitations to what my business operations could be. However, my business, the Bookshelf, never stopped operating. What it did do was close to the public. So we pretty immediately in mid-March, pivoted to curbside pickup, free delivery, phone orders, and we shrunk our staff. I was able to keep my entire staff through the grace of God, but I really limited to me and my manager. So for essentially 3 months, I think between 2 and 3 months, my manager and I really maintained all operations of the store. And it was just a drastically different way of doing business. And we were high on adrenaline. I think I will speak for my manager when I say that as well. Like we were so kind of teamwork minded, get through this. Like there was a lot of energy that we had, I think, because we didn't know what the future held. And we were able to so quickly pivot.
Right.
Immediately, we saw an increase in online orders.
Right.
I've talked about this slightly on From the Front Porch, but the bookshelf prior to the pandemic was operating 80% in store. Like that
Mhm.
80% of our sales came from in-store foot traffic, 20% online.
Mhm.
Mid-March, that immediately flipped, where we still had 20% of our sales coming from local customers who were doing curbside pickup or free
Right.
delivery, but 80% of our sales were coming from online, which was amazing and is what certainly got us through the pandemic. But there's a high cost to doing online orders. Shipping is more expensive, packaging
Mhm.
is more expensive. So it's definitely a different way of doing business. So that's kind of how the business immediately had to pivot and change from being this storefront to I took a video. I took a video of the bookshelf probably in April of last year, and it looked like I don't know, but it looked like what I imagine a frat house looks like. Like there was bubble wrap everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there were packages because it was just me and Olivia packaging books and acting as a shipping warehouse, essentially, which is very
Wow.
different from our beautiful storefront that we work really hard, right, to fill with beautiful displays.
Right.
Um, mentally, mentally,
Yeah.
mentally, it has been the hardest year of business ownership. And let me be very clear that every year is pretty hard. Like
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
every year has its challenges and issues. But this past year, between the constant not knowing, the constant trying to have good ideas, to be able to be creative and to be able to not be stagnant, to be able to move and change and adapt, and then to have concern for my staff's health, to have concern for their
Mhm.
safety,
Mhm.
to we had locally we did not have mask mandates, and I know masks have become almost a kind of political touchstone, but
Mhm.
I actually found that to be really difficult, where I had to set the rules and boundaries for my business
Mhm.
and receive judgment from all sides,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter what I did.
Mhm.
And so that was also mentally draining.
Yeah.
For people to make assumptions about my business and about my beliefs based on the decisions I was making was difficult.
Yeah.
To try to make decisions that my staff would, even if they didn't agree with it, that they would be able to go along with and respect. Um, there were just a lot of burdens
Yeah.
this year that made it a mentally exhausting year, even while the business itself wound up doing quite well and wound up really having a remarkable 2020. Mentally, I think even still, I am in the midst of some burnout. It's just been a hard
Mhm.
year.
Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel, or are you already into the light? Is it already almost back to normal, or are you seeing those numbers flip back a little bit?
Mhm. That's a good question. I definitely see a light. I don't think we're totally, and it'll be interesting what normal now looks like for the bookshelf. So I
Mhm.
thought for sure those numbers would flip back almost entirely over the holiday season and maybe even by January. I thought, oh, we'll go back to 80/20 with 80
Mhm.
in store, 80% in store. And that has not really been the case. We are operating at about 50/50. So
Oh,
50%
mm.
of our sales are back in store. We certainly have seen an uptick in foot traffic, definitely, especially since in April was our town's Rose Festival, and it was like the
Mhm.
100th anniversary, and they took some COVID precautions, but I think they were really creative and did a great job with the festival
Mhm.
itself. And so really from that point, we have felt, even with masks and things like that, we have still felt like, okay, things are feeling normal-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not doing in-store events yet. That'll come back this fall.
Mhm.
Partly because we mentally don't have the bandwidth. Like it's not just COVID, it's just mentally staffing wise, and our store looks different. So we have, instead of like a story time area for kids, we have a shipping area. Like the store has physically
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
So we are not back to total normalcy yet.
Mhm.
And again, it'll be interesting to see what normal actually looks like. I'm starting to realize, oh, these online sales, and I'm very grateful, I
Mhm.
don't think these online sales are going anywhere. I think, and Jordan and I have talked about this, like it's my hope that during a really difficult season we were able to provide people with comfort and with good books and with a service. And I hope we were able to do really well at that.
Mhm.
And as a result, it's our goal to retain those customers.
Mhm.
And some people will go back, and we encourage people to shop at their local independent bookstore.
Mhm.
But I think for people who maybe don't have a local independent bookstore in their area, it's kind of my hope that we have become theirs, even far away. So I think that 50-50 is could be could be what our future looks like. I don't know. But I'm starting to realize those online sales may not go back to that 20% number that they were pre-pandemic.
Because you were basically forced to nurture that and
Mhm.
hone that side of your business that maybe you would not have
Yes.
worked as hard. Now, Annie, just give an example. If someone who does not have an indie bookstore and
Mhm.
they're a bibliophile, what do you offer? What would they get from ordering their books from the bookshelf as opposed to Amazon?
Yeah. So here's the thing. When you support an independent bookstore like the Bookshelf, that money is going into paying employees. It's going into paying lots of taxes, lots
Yeah.
of local taxes. It's going right back into my community. And so when you are supporting the Bookshelf, you are supporting Thomasville, Georgia. So if you like to visit Thomasville, if you've been there before, or if you've seen it in Southern Living, or if you like small
Mhm.
towns and you want them to thrive, supporting an independent bookstore helps the community in which that bookstore resides. That's the first thing. The
Mhm.
second thing I hope you're getting, and perhaps this is less practical, but I hope what you're getting when you buy from the Bookshelf is a personalized experience. So you are immediately connected with Aaron or Lucy. They are our online sales
Mhm.
people. They do a fantastic job of customer service, of helping you navigate the Bookshelf's ordering system. And they know you by name. Just like we know our in-store customers, we know our online customers by name. We know our regulars, we know what they like. And
Mhm.
and Amazon can't do that. Amazon has an algorithm that can like maybe sort of kind of predict what you might like to read, but we are people and we have brains. so,
That's
and
right.
so
It's a little
I'd like
spooky the way Amazon does it. I'll just be honest. It's a
yeah,
little
yes,
scary.
that's right. And
Yeah.
instead, we do
Yeah.
that by
Yeah.
crafting real human connection, even with
Right.
our long distance customers. I think we do a really good job at that. And so when you buy from us, you're buying from people
Right.
and you're paying for that kind of personal connection. And this is again maybe just a thing that I care about, but when you order from us, the packaging is really cute. You get a handwritten note. It looks like a present, so even if you're buying for yourself, it
Yeah.
is like unwrapping a treat. And that's how I feel when I buy from small businesses. I buy a lot from small businesses, and when
Yes.
I open my mailbox, I feel like I've gotten a treat in the mail. Whereas if you
Yes.
order from Amazon, it has just been shoved in a box and there's really no craft
Yeah.
or
It's
care that goes
usually
into that.
bent or, smashed a little bit for the
Yes.
handling, depending upon your delivery. Well, Annie, I do have to attest to that because, as you know, I had my daughter's wedding. We decided for the children, I was not going to go get them a piece of silver, something that they would not care a lick about. That's,
Mhm.
the things a lot of people get, like a piece of jewelry or whatever. And
Yep.
I totally delegated that to you and your I think was Lucy the one who helped me or
It may have been
okay.
Lucy. Yes.
And anyway, I gave y'all the ages of the children
Mhm.
and y'all put together the most precious, wonderful, and appropriate gift boxes. You
Mhm.
had books, you had a toy, like a little craft. And I
Yep.
will tell you, they loved those. And I think that is something that, well, you can't, and they were wrapped beautifully and
Mhm.
there was a personal note. And
Yeah.
wow, yeah, you just cannot get that.
Yeah, and we that was one thing that immediately took off for us at the start of the pandemic. We in again, mid-March, I think it's all kind of a blur, but mid-March, April, we did kids boredom boxes and you
Oh,
gave us your price point and
huh,
because we knew, right? Kids were at home from school. They were trying to do virtual learning, but that was a challenge. And
yeah.
so we did these boredom boxes where you gave an age and Olivia, who is excellent at finding great kids product and kind of matching the perfect book with the perfect person. She really handled all of those boxes. And that was a huge hit for us. Like, we knew we could provide that service because that's what our store does. And we really had to be creative about how can we mimic the in-store experience for the online customer. And what's so special about the in-store experience is browsing and kind of the
Mhm.
serendipity of finding something perfect. And
Mhm.
so we did that for you. Like, Olivia went through the children's section and, picked out things for this 10-year-old girl and then boxed it up
Mhm.
and mailed it off. And so boredom boxes were a big hit. And then I was responsible for the adult surprise book boxes. So if you're an adult reader and you give me a price point and you tell me a little bit about your reading habits, I can craft a box for you. And so those were really popular for us in the pandemic, and they've continued to be popular. We still do gift boxes and gift sets and adult surprise book boxes that are very fun to do.
Okay, that is interesting that you brought that up. Our friend, and she actually manages our the finances, Melanie Nichols. She lives here. When she follows me, she says, "Oh my goodness, I get the monthly." I don't know if it's what you just referred to, but she's a member, and
She
she
gets
gets.
their shelf subscription.
Oh yes,
Mhm.
loves it, and she'll
Mhm.
post the book that she's reading that month and just how
Mhm.
she likes it. So that's such a great service. So do you just
Yeah.
is the same book does the same book go out to everyone in that circle?
Yeah,
Or
so we
okay,
do yeah, we do a monthly service called the shelf subscription. I think
yeah,
Melanie is a subscriber there.
uh-huh,
And basically you pick, and this is a way I really to want the bookshelf to feel personalized. And
mhm,
so one of my favorite things when I go into an independent bookstore is to see what their staff is reading. And I like to see, like,
yes,
which staffer am I the most like? So at the bookshelf, if you sign up for our shelf subscription service, you pick which staffer you're the most like. So I read literary fiction and occasionally nonfiction. Olivia reads suspense, mysteries, and thrillers.
mhm,
Lucy reads historical fiction.
mhm,
My mom and Nancy read PG-13 lit. So
mhm,
for sensitive readers, more sensitive readers. And
mhm,
so you pick the staffer, and then each staffer has picked their favorite first edition hardback book of the month. So if you sign up for Annie, you get my favorite book every month for however many months you sign up for. And then I write you a note why I liked it, what I loved about it, what I think you'll like about it. And it has proven to be, we started that service almost 5 years ago.
mhm,
And and during the pandemic, it grew.
yeah, yeah,
It doubled, it doubled in size.
yeah.
And so we're mailing about 400 books out every month to people all over the country. And it is one of my favorite things that we do because it forces me to really narrow down what my favorite book of the month is.
Yes, yes.
And it's fun to include the staff and to include Lucy and Olivia and to see what they're reading. And it's just fun to ship books out all over the country. It's pretty cool.
Are the memberships for a year the same regardless of what genre? A
Yes. So
book.
the prices are the same, and you can sign up for 1, 3, 6, or 12 months.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, do you have a category? It's funny. I indicated that my daughter did ask this question because you were
Yes.
mentioning the genres. She
Yes.
said, "Ask Annie why it's important to read fiction. I'm practical." And see, I'm just like Ellie. I cannot make myself read fiction. I
Mhm.
want practical self help or cookbook or real life or current events.
Yeah.
Tell us why we need to read fiction.
Yeah, this is a great question, Ellie. And I think Ellie and I have actually talked a little bit about this
Mhm.
before, maybe a couple years ago. My brother falls in a very similar category. So he loves to read books about theology, history,
Yeah.
politics, but he struggles with fiction.
Mhm.
And my answer is I have a couple of answers. The first is that I really believe that fiction helps us to develop empathy, right? And to put another person's skin on for a second and
Mm.
to really and I think that would appeal to Ellie, right? Like
Yeah.
I can think of no one else who would want to be more empathetic than somebody like Ellie. And so for me, fiction helps me put on another person's skin for a little bit, and it helps me really think about what I would do in a particular situation. And I think nonfiction can do that, but I think fiction does that better. I think it provides a world in which you can kind of get lost in,
Mhm.
and I think it helps us develop empathy. I'd
Mhm.
also argue that really good fiction does the same things that good nonfiction does. So one of the books I immediately thought of, and I've recommended to my brother, and I think I've recommended to Ellie, but it's Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. And this is a book that has deep theological truths. It is a beautifully written book, but it is fiction. But when
Mhm.
you're reading it, I think you will get the same things out of it that you would reading a theological treatise or a book by N.T. Wright or C.S. Lewis. Like, I think you're
Oh,
going to
wow.
get the same types of beautiful lessons in spirituality and theology from Marilyn Robinson in this fictional work that you would from these kind of giants in the nonfiction realm. And some of our favorite nonfiction writers like C.S. Lewis loved fiction and wrote good fiction. And so I
Mhm.
think it's important to explore multiple genres. I like nonfiction too, but
Mhm.
there is something about getting lost in the world of fiction and I think really good fiction. And Gilead is one example, but I even think about Jane Austen's works or
Mhm.
one of my favorite books of last year is a book called Transcendent Kingdom. Like these are books that ask us to think about the other person. And then also, I think, have a lot of truths that we can kind of cling to, just like we can when we learn something through a nonfiction work of literature.
Right. And how many, you mentioned C.S. Lewis, how many of his books would you say were fiction and how many were
I mean, all the Narnia books, right, were fiction.
right? Narnia.
And and then he also wrote the space trilogy. So, I mean, probably percentages, I would say he probably did 60 to 65% nonfiction, but there's
Mhm.
still quite a catalog of fiction to dive into.
Right. And Annie, I'm going to link to all that you're mentioning. I'll mention that particular book and author and all the ways to get with you. But I was on your Instagram this morning
Mhm.
and you mentioned a book, Competitive Grieving. It
Yes.
was on your reel and it
Yes.
caught my eye. I was going to ask you about it because I'm currently grieving, cry every day
Yes.
about my precious town. And thank you and Jordan, y'all sent the sweetest note. And on that, just on that point, never underestimate the power of a written note when someone is grieving. And that meant so much. And it was so
Mhm.
thoughtfully written and so forth. But when you, and this is one thing I love about your Instagram. And Annie, was that on your Annie B. Jones or was that on your bookshelf? I can't remember because I follow
That was
you on
on
both.
Bookshelf. Yeah,
On
that
the
was
bookshelf.
Bookshelf.
You, because that's where you give all of your book reviews, which are they're
Mhm.
fabulous. You said that this was about a girl who lost a childhood best friend,
Mhm.
which I
Yes.
did at 6 years old. I lost, and he was a boy, Brad.
Mhm.
Lost him. I want to say it was encephalitis, and I just remember still at 55, that is
Mm.
a marker on my life that, and I don't even know how it affected me. But can you just give us a little snippet of that and what kind of book is that? It just sounds
Yeah.
intriguing to me.
Yeah, so it's so interesting, especially coming off of Ellie's question. But Competitive Grieving is a book that caught my eye. I read a lot of books in advance of their publication. This one
Mhm.
was just released a couple weeks ago. And it is a book about a young woman. She's in her 20s, 30s, and her childhood best friend has just died. So it's early adulthood. But Jordan and I lost a friend in adulthood a few years ago. And so I was kind of intrigued because there is something about losing a peer that is
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, a marker. I think you're exactly right, kind of a marker. And so I started this book and it's extremely, I'd like to be very clear, it's extremely snarky and sarcastic
Mhm.
and tongue in cheek. The main character who's kind of our narrator, she has lost her best friend and kind of doesn't know what to do with her
Mhm.
grief.
Yeah.
And I wound up really falling in love with this book because I liked the snark. I loved the humor. There's also, I think in my reel, I said like a sneaky good romantic comedy in here as well. There's like a little love interest. And so that adds some levity. But one thing that I really liked about this book was reading it in a time where a lot of us are grieving and
Mhm.
whether it's the loss of a pet or a loved one or just this collective grieving that we're doing over the last year. the loss of plans, the
Mhm.
loss of expectations, the loss of family and time together. Like we are grieving things. And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have found myself drawn to books about grief. And so this is a work of fiction that I definitely could find myself enmeshed in that reminded me of my own loss of a peer. And that also reminded me of the humanity of the current humanity and the current state of the world. And so I really love this book. I think it's very funny, snarky.
Mhm.
But if you are grieving, I think it'll also strike a chord with you.
And I might just ask you to give a few books on grief, because when
Mhm.
I put that on my story, I had just a deluge of people saying they were either grieving the loss of a pet
Mhm.
or we're just getting over the grief. And a pet is just one type of grief, and it's
Right.
there are lots of types of grief, but those are good recommendations, I think.
Yeah, competitive grieving was great fiction. I also read a book pretty recently called Crying in Hmart by Michelle Zauner. And it's a memoir about a woman who loses her mother. And it's based on it's a true story. It's her memoir, but she wrote an essay for the New Yorker called Crying in Hmart. So I'd encourage people to go read that essay. And if
How do you
you're
spell that? H Mart.
it's just Hmart. So the letter H and then Mart.
Okay.
And so crying in Hmart. And if you read the essay on the New Yorker and you like that essay, I think you'll love the book. I thought it was a beautiful tribute to both her mother and the complications of their relationship. It wasn't necessarily this ideal mother-daughter relationship,
Mhm.
but I think it was very real mother-daughter relationship. And then it also is about her identity with Korean culture. That's where that phrase H Mart comes from. It's a Korean
Mhm.
grocery store. So it's also a lot about food. So it's really a tribute to food and identity and cultural heritage. One of my favorite books about grief is A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, and then The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. Those are some of my favorite books about grief, but I actually think Crying in H Mart, while a more modern take, deserves its place kind of among these grief books.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to make note of those. Okay. Let's switch to, because I want to know about what you're doing with your dad. Is it monthly? You're doing
Yes.
a cooking class. Anyone, anywhere can sign up, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So
And it's not a
yeah.
cooking class. What are you referring to?
Yeah, so it's called Well Read and Sandwich Bread because my favorite food is a sandwich. And when I was growing up, I really thought the coolest thing would be to own a bookstore with a sandwich shop attached. I no longer think that. I no longer want to own a restaurant. I'm not interested in that. But I thought it'd be fun to have like literary themed sandwiches. So when I was growing up, I thought the Old Man in the Sea would be the tuna sandwich. Like these are the ideas I had as a kid.
It's
So
so creative.
so my one of the things that has been really hard over the last year is finding joy in my business. And that's
Mhm.
just because the year has been hard. And I think it's been
Yeah.
hard for all of us to
Yeah.
find joy in different
Yeah.
things. So I I actually had a customer. I had said that this sandwich idea, like I had said that I wanted to own a sandwich shop when I was a kid. And I had a customer message me and say, I'd pay to watch you make sandwiches. And I was like, you would? Like, why would you why would you pay to watch me make sandwiches?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I thought, well, wait a minute. My mom, she does one of our shelf subscription services. She comes on the podcast sometimes, but I hadn't done anything really store related with my dad, except he does our repairs. Like
Yeah.
he's kind of
Yeah.
our repair guy.
Yeah.
But I thought, wait, he loves to cook. He's a good teacher. I think it'd be fun to record these videos. My cousin Ashley works for Fresh from Florida, which she works for the Department of Agriculture. So she often films and does photo shoots with food anyway. And so
Oh,
I was like, would
wow.
you film my dad and I kind of doing this cooking show? And so we are on hiatus for the summer. We're coming back in August, I think August
Yeah.
or September. But we have done, I think we did 4 or 5 well read and sandwich breads. And they're like these 20 to 30-minute little YouTube videos. We do treat them like an event. So right now you have to pay to view the videos, but you can pay to watch the backlog. So
Okay.
you can pay for each video, and included in that payment are access to the video and then a recipe card. So a full recipe card with all the ingredients and with Shop Dad's tips on how to make the sandwich better. And
What are
so
the sandwiches that you've done and what books? And I want to make sure I've got this right. well-read and sandwich bread, BREAD?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So what sandwiches have y'all made and what books were they? Because to me, that requires some creativity. Number one, finding a book that you can make a sandwich from. I mean,
Yes.
and like if you did Chronicles of Narnia, I mean, you can't make what is it, the Turkish delight. You're
Right.
not a
Yeah, you'd have to get super creative.
yeah.
So we did our May sandwich in honor of our family's Kentucky heritage was the Kentucky hot brown, which is
Ooh, I love
delicious. That sandwich is so good. I think
yeah.
it might have been my favorite one we did. And I grew up eating that sandwich, but I had never made it. And so my dad kind of walked me through the process of making it. And we based it on a book called The $80 Champion, which is a book about an $80 racehorse. So it's about horses and horse racing. And the
Yeah.
Kentucky hot brown is like a famous Kentucky dish, Kentucky Derby. So anyway, so that's kind of how we tied that in. That was our May sandwich. We did a pizza sandwich called the hot and crusty pizza sandwich. And we called it that because there's a really cute young adult novel called It's Kind of a Cheesy Love Story. And in that book, the main character works at a pizza place called the Hot and Crusty Pizza Place. And so that's what we named our sandwich. And so it's been very fun. It's definitely my dad does all the work in terms of buying the ingredients and getting us prepped
Yeah.
for the meal aspect, but it requires me to really put on my creative thinking cap and find a book that's appropriate for the sandwich that we pick.
Yeah. And do the people who sign up, you give them an ingredient list and they have the ingredients and they just make it?
Yeah,
Oh,
they can make it anytime. And we've had somebody sent us a picture of them making my dad couldn't believe it. Somebody sent us pictures of them making the hot and crusty pizza sandwich. And it's cool to watch people get to do what you do.
so it's not live. I did think at one point that the first one was live and you were
Yeah.
interacting with people, but it's basically follow along.
It's follow along, although we've decided because we were worried about internet and my dad and I both were like, we are not professionals, but we've done 4 or 5 of them now.
Yeah.
And so I think in the fall, we're going to try to go live where people can watch live. They could make the sandwich along with us if they wanted to. I think we're good enough now where we could do it live.
Okay. I want you, when we see each other again, to give me tips because I want to go live and just make a few things that
Yeah.
people, ask me about frequently that are easy,
Yes.
but going live and cooking and having to interact, I'm like,
Right.
my brain will not focus on that.
I told Ashley who films them. She doesn't help.
Yeah.
She does it. She films them. I told her if we go live, she has to be the one in the comments because I get distracted. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how we would do it, but I think with Ashley's help, we could do it.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a fun. And where would people find that? I'm sure you link to it from your website, but if people
Yes.
listening are thinking, oh my goodness, I want to either get the membership or you're still doing the boredom boxes.
Yes. Mhm.
I mean, there's so many different things you do. The main place
Yeah.
to go is bookshelfthomasville.com or what's your?
Yes. It's bookshelfthomasville.com and you can find all of our events and you can even buy tickets to past events because we filmed most of them because of the
Okay.
pandemic. So you can buy tickets and kind of get access to the previous events we've done, like the Well Read and Sandwich Bread events. That's where you can find information about our subscription services. It's where you can buy books. It's where you can buy boredom boxes, surprise boxes. All of it is on bookshelfthomasville.com.
And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that boredom boxes, what a great and unique gift to give to if your children are going to a birthday party and they
Yes.
want to give the coolest gift ever, give the boredom box.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll try to do too. I'll set up a 10% off code for your listeners.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, we'll do that. And I think I'll set it up. It'll probably be Family Savvy or something like that, but I'll send it to you so you can put it in your show notes. But so they get 10% off and they can try purchasing from us.
Oh, that's amazing. And then also not just for the children, I think the ones for adults who are bibliophiles or who are readers, which I guess
Yes.
that's the same, lovers of books, that subscription, because
Yeah,
you can
the
get any price point. You can
That's
get
right.
okay.
Yeah. Our most popular is the 3 months. But we have people give the 1 month, subscription. Maybe that's what they can afford and kind of what makes sense for their budget. And then that person can decide if they want to keep going or not. But a 1 month makes a great gift. And then 3 month is our most popular option.
And you'll get 3 books and the note and the
Yep.
synopsis and all of that. Okay.
Yep.
What is your favorite book for 2020 pre-COVID? And
Okay.
then the favorite book post-COVID? And did COVID weigh into those choices?
Okay. So of 2020, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett and Transcendent Kingdom by Yad Jesse. Those are my top 2 books of 2020. I loved both of them. I think I would have loved them in any year. I believe that. But I do think in a year where we were grappling with our own grief, where we were stuck in our homes, where we were faced with racial injustice, these were books that really captured my attention.
Mhm.
And I think for me, that is something that drastically changed about my reading life. My attention span feels non-existent. And I feel like I
Mhm.
have a pretty good attention span.
Right.
So any book that kind of captured me
Mhm.
deserved a place in like my top 10. And those 2 books I absolutely devoured. I
Okay.
loved the characters. I cared deeply for them. And I think those writers are excellent. These were both works in both of these cases, Britt Bennett and Yad Jesse. It was their second work of fiction. So that
Mhm.
often authors have what we call, or it feels like they have what we call a sophomore slump. So they have this great debut novel, but
Mhm.
then their second novel kind of falls flat. And
Right.
instead, these women wrote these beautiful, absolutely beautiful books. So those are my top 2 books of 2020. And I think again, I would have liked them in any other year,
Mhm.
but because of all that was weighing on our
Mhm.
shoulders, I think those books really hit home. So far this year, my favorite book is Olympus, Texas by Stacey Swan.
Okay.
This is a debut novel, and it is. People who listen to From the Front Porch or who follow me on Instagram know I love a good dysfunctional family story. I love books about families who are complicated,
Uh-huh.
and this is a complicated Texas family.
Mhm.
If you appreciate or know about Greek myths, there is some Greek myth tie in here. I am not. I am not very well read when it comes to
Yeah.
Greek myth, but this book still was absolutely stunning. The Texas setting was great, the
Yeah.
writing is fantastic, and this very rich, complicated character study of this family was just excellent. And I think one of the reasons I liked it in 2021 was it is still dealing with some heavy things, like some stuff happens that just
Yeah.
blows your mind in the book,
Yeah.
but it's not too heavy handed. It is fairly short, so it held my attention,
Mhm.
and it is just stunning writing. So I really like that one this year so far. I'm anxious to see. I've got some other books I'm looking forward to, and some books I really liked in
Yeah.
2021 that were fun. I'm thinking of Early Morning Riser by Katherine Heine. I loved
Mhm.
that book because it was light, and I think again, so much about the last 15 months has been heavy that
Yeah.
sometimes what I want is a light, funny book, and that certainly fit the bill. So those are kind of my top 2 for each year.
Yeah. Okay, I have 2 more, and I know you are on a time crunch, but I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
Number 1, I have because my eyes, I'm half blind. I do Audible books. Do
Mhm.
you have an option?
Independent bookstores, the Bookshelf is not one of them. Independent bookstores really laud Nooks. Wait, is that no?
Oh,
Is that
oh,
right?
yes, a Nook.
Is that wait a minute? Is Nook Barnes and Noble? Now I'm second
Oh,
guessing
yes, Nook
myself.
is Barnes& and Noble. There's,
Kobo. That's what it is. Okay, I'm
oh,
sorry.
okay.
Independent bookstores frequently recommend Kobo,
Okay.
which is an e-reader. The Bookshelf does not. I tried it. This was
Yeah.
years ago. It may have improved, but I didn't love it years ago. But some independent bookstores really swear by them, and it is a way to support an independent bookstore rather than Amazon. I will say there is a way to support independent bookstores through audiobooks. So there's a website called Libro FM. So it's Libro.fm. And it is just like listening to a book through Audible, through I'm trying to even think of other audiobook
Can you
services through your
download that app on your
yes.
iPhone?
Yep.
Oh, well, that's that. Because if you can put the app on the iPhone, or I
Yes.
know people do have Androids as well, but
Yes. But you can
then
do,
that's
yeah.
okay.
You can do a Libro FM app and you can buy a membership just like you would through Audible, or you can buy one book at a time. Libro FM, I don't listen to a ton of audiobooks myself, but I do listen to some, and I always use Libro FM because you can pick your bookstore that you want to support,
Mhm.
and then they get a percentage of the proceeds. So when you listen to Libro FM and support the bookshelf, we get a percentage of that, which is just fantastic. It's a great service and it's a really great user-friendly app, I think.
Okay. And Annie, I just realized, but I'm so glad because I also listen to Audible, but I said Audible and I was talking about, um,
Kindle,
yes, but I do it
e-reader.
on my iPhone, but I
Yep.
have to, but if I read anything, I have to be able to have the font. Do y'all have, but that's the,
Yeah, the only thing
okay.
we do the audiobooks, and then Kobo is the
Okay.
independent bookstore e-reader.
Okay.
But that's probably the best. And we do sell large print books, but that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last thing. I know your reader retreat is a huge, huge deal and it sells out like pretty quickly every time.
Mhm.
Can you quickly tell people what your reader retreat is and if there's one that's going to open soon?
This is the big question because it's the question I have as well. So, reader retreats are my staff's and my, I think, favorite thing that we do. So, we launched them in 2019. We hosted 2 of them. We partnered with a local bed and breakfast and provided a weekend's worth of literary activities. So, people came from all over the country, stayed at this bed and breakfast. We did a beautiful porch dinner. Then we had a visiting author. We did a book club conversation. They had a night of exclusive shopping at the bookshelf, and we did a live podcast recording. So it's a really fun
Mhm.
weekend. What I wanted, I hated summer camp growing up, but I'm also fascinated by summer camps. So
Yeah.
I wanted something that would have like a camp like feel for introverted grown-ups, although extroverts are certainly welcome to attend.
Oh,
But
that's fabulous. I love
but I
it.
just
Yeah.
wanted something that people could come and they could read, they could participate in the activities if they wanted to, but you don't have
Mhm.
to.
Yeah.
But like have just enough activities and all kind of revolving around books that would keep people entertained and interested, but also give people free time to read on their own or whatever. Explore Thomasville. So we love doing that. We partner with a local bed and breakfast called the Paxton House.
Mhm.
The Paxton House sold this week to a private resident. And so we are very
Oh,
sad. And this is another way in which we're just having to pivot.
yeah.
So I am currently, actually today, I'm visiting a local hotel to see what, if that's a potential partnership. I'm also looking into Airbnbs and
Yeah.
caterers so that we can mimic the experience that we provided in 2019, but obviously under different circumstances. We will no
Yeah.
longer will have this wonderful bed and breakfast that we love, but I still want to be able to do these reader retreats because our staff
Yeah.
loves them. I love them. It's a way for us to connect to long distance customers. It's a way
Mhm.
to bring readers together, and
Yeah.
it's a way to bring readers and boost the economy of our small town. And so I love these reader retreats. I have every intent of bringing them back. I thought we might do one in October, but now I'm not sure because now I'm trying to find a new home for these reader retreats. But I would suspect that if not October, January 2022.
Will you ever consider doing reader retreats where you travel somewhere else? I
Yes.
think I have an
I
idea. I have an
yes,
idea.
I
I
would
want
love
you to
to do
come
that.
to Purcell Farms
Oh, fun.
and do a reader retreat because, and you and Jordan need to come to our farm, Marble Valley Farm, which is 7 miles from
Oh,
Purcell.
okay.
So we could have activities on the
Yes.
farm. And then, of course, Purcell has all of that. And then you could have people who follow you and who love books and would love to attend. I mean, that's just a thought. I mean,
Oh, I would love to do that. I've been meeting one of the things I've done in 2022 is I had one in 2019 and 2020, but I've gotten a new business coach in 2022 or 2021, and she asked me what like my pie in the sky dream was for the bookshelf, and I said one of the things I'd really love to do is travel. I love to travel, and I
mhm.
would love to travel and get to do these reader retreats in other places. So I love this idea.
Annie, this has just been such a pleasure. I mean,
Yay.
I am so grateful that you came on. And if you will let me share all of this and
Yes.
send me the names of the books again, because I wrote them down, but I want to make sure I've got the authors correct and
Yes.
all of that. But Annie, thank you. And thanks to all of you listening. And I just hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.